Let's go back, way before the Cataclysm, the Archon War, Teyvat, and even humans, in a place called the Old World. The Old World is the very earliest understanding we have of Genshin's world so far. This took place in the Light Realm, and it was occupied by purely elemental creatures, mostly dragons and Vishaps. Vishaps simply being younger dragons. There were two other realms, however. The Dark Realm, which existed as an opposite to the Light Realm, as of course, if you're going to have light, you must also have dark. Think of these as the yin and the yang. And then the third realm being the Human Realm, which we'll talk about later as it has not been made yet at this point in the Old World. These Vishaps followed their own type of gods as well, and they were called the Seven Sovereigns. They were also dragons that were the strongest in their elements. These essentially were one of the oldest confirmed gods we know of. These Seven Sovereigns ruled the Light Realm, until the eternal thrones of heaven and the Primordial One appeared, ushering in a new era called When the Dove Held Branches. Now, this may all sound a little confusing, but bear with me. The problem is we don't actually know much about the eternal thrones of heaven, but it was said that after their appearance, the world was forever changed. It's my hypothesis, but I believe that when the Primordial One came, so did others, forming these so-called heavenly thrones. This would kind of be like a pre-Celestia. It's said that when the world itself was made anew, the Primordial One created the world with an eggshell from which it was birthed from. That may sound strange, but we'll talk about why that is in a bit. They also fought against the Seven Sovereigns, eventually winning after 40 whole years of battle. It was during this time it also created shades of itself, which were essentially separated forms, of which there would be 4. One of these forms we'll talk about now, Istaroth. Istaroth, who you may have heard of already, is also known as the god of time and/or wind. They are highly regarded as being one of these very shades, as much of the information regarding the Primordial One stems from their writings. They also mention the other 3 shades and don't mention the 4th shade, so it's highly likely they are the 4th shade. Istaroth believed the true identity of the Primordial One to have been Phanes. Now, we don't know much about Phanes, but Istaroth claims Phanes was neither man nor woman with wings and a crown birthed from an egg. Phanes originally comes from Greek mythology, following a similar story. His name means to bring light, and he emerged from a void or watery abyss. Phanes was born from an egg entwined with a serpent, which in this case could have been Orabashi, which we'll talk about in a moment. Phanes had a wife as well, Nyx, who is said to have created nighttime as Phanes created daytime. So it's possible that we will find out much more about Phanes in the future, and who these people like Nyx could be in the story. After the Sovereigns were defeated, the Primordial One then created the Earth. 400 years later, the world would take more of its form today. Now, interestingly, Istaroth says that the sea and the oceans accepted those who rebelled and those who would not kneel. This is a peculiar line because humans at this point have not yet been made, so we are to wonder who inhabited the world before the humans. This may be a reference to the Seelies, which long predated humans, and if you're interested in the subject of Seelies, I already have a video on that, and I highly encourage you to go check it out. It also sounds like it could have been the people of Enkanomiya, as they were lost to the sea, but at this point they have not existed yet, so we'll talk about them a little later in the video. The Primordial One, along with one of its shades, would go on to create all the creatures of the earth. First the birds of the air, the beasts of the earth, the fish of the sea, flowers, grass, and trees. Then finally, the very last thing they would create would be the humans, and these would be the original humans that inhabited the world. They would go on to create a covenant with the Primordial One. This essentially was kind of like a trade deal that would benefit the human beings. Now, it's said the Primordial One had a sacred plan for humans, and as time went along, the heavens would work with the humans to bring them food, rain, and riches. There was, however, one outlined taboo that the humans were not to conduct, and that was to succumb to temptation. What exactly this temptation was, still unclear, but it's likely that this was some kind of original sin, maybe to forsake the gods or to seek forbidden knowledge. Istaroth then details a time period called the Funerary Year. This is when the second thrones of the heaven came, and along with it, the second who came. This was essentially a second version of the Primordial One. A great war would break out where the Primordial One would fight the second who came, and this war ravaged the world, and it is what sent Enkanyomiya into the sea, thus starting the era of darkness in the history of Enkanyomiya, or the ancestors of Enkanyomiya rather. After an unknown amount of time, Celestia would be in power actually. We're not exactly sure when they appeared, or if they were the ones that arrived when the second thrones of the heavens came. Humans would be directly communicating with Celestia. The world would be in a much more peaceful and hospitable state, with elemental energies being supplied through the ley lines from the Irminsul tree. In Celestia's rule, they preferred humans to exist in cycles. Civilization would rise and fall, all under Celestia's purview. They would have envoys who would roam the land amongst the humans, but remain silent when humans asked them how long they would be prosperous for. These envoys are likely to be the early forms of archons, before archons were an actual defined position. Celestia would continue to be in power throughout Salvin Dagnir's existence and become less involved with humanity after the Cataclysm. I won't go too much into detail about these two events because I have videos on both of them already, but to summarize, after Celestia's involvement with Conria, we have not really seen any interactions with Celestia since then. If you're interested in more details about Enkanyomiya's history and the other ancient civilizations, let me know in the comments. Now, earlier in the video, I mentioned how Orabashi might have originated at the same time as the Primordial One. It's important to understand, however, what comes from the lore and what comes from the mythology of real life. In the lore of the Byakokuyakoku Collection written by Istaroth, it is said that the Primordial One came from an egg, but it does not mention anything about a serpent. In the real-life mythology of the Primordial One, however, it does say that the egg was entwined with a serpent. What links these two is that Genshin often takes from real-life mythology, and Istaroth specifically refers to Orabashi as a serpent in these writings later on, as well as the rest of the Enkanyomiyans in their writings. So because we do not know when Orabashi originated or where he came from, it's possible Orabashi could have been one of the progenitor gods. It is a little bit of a stretch, but I do believe that the writers of Genshin are simply leaving out the fact that the egg was entwined with a serpent so they can reveal this lore later on and shed some light onto Orabashi. So we covered a lot of information today, with the Primordial One, the Eternal Thrones of Heaven, the Second Who Came, and Istaroth. And it seems that when the Second Who Came arrived and did battle with the Primordial One, there was some sort of shift in power. And it's likely the Second Who Came inherited the world and allowed Celestia to be in rule of it. Once Celestia was in power, they preferred the humans to exist in a cycle, because it was inevitable that they would eventually question the gods and wonder how long they would lend out a generous hand. And so, all of these events are leading up to the current day Genshin, where Celestia seems to still be in power, and may at any point strike down once more like they did with Conria and Salvin Dagnir. So I hope this helped you understand some of the oldest lore Genshin has to offer, and I know it can be quite confusing, so I hope this video was easy to understand. And if you're interested in more content, leave a comment letting me know what I should cover next, or check out the Discord in the description to see what I'm actively working on. But as always, thank you for watching.